The first human ship arrived in the Arvellan system without ceremony. No grand fleet, no show of force, only a single exploration vessel drifting calmly toward a world of silver clouds and glowing oceans. To the Arvellans, who measured importance by size and spectacle, this seemed almost insulting. Yet curiosity outweighed pride, and the ship was allowed to land. Commander Ethan Hale stood inside the docking chamber, his posture straight but relaxed. He had trained for first contact for most of his adult life. He had studied alien cultures, learned restraint, and practiced silence as much as speech. Still, nothing prepared him for the scale of the palace that greeted him. Towers curved like living crystal, and light flowed through walls as if the building itself were breathing. The Arvellan guards escorted him with perfect formation. They were taller than humans, their movements smooth and precise. Ethan kept his eyes forward. He had learned early that staring could be taken as challenge or weakness, depending on the species. Princess Lyra watched from a high balcony. She had seen many species arrive at her father's court. Most stared in awe. Some bowed too deeply. Others tried too hard to impress. The human did none of these things. He walked with quiet confidence, his gaze steady, his expression thoughtful rather than fearful. That alone made her interested. Lyra was not yet ruler, but her influence was strong. She had earned her position through years of study and careful decisions. Not simply birth, the council trusted her judgment, even if they sometimes underestimated her curiosity. And right now, her curiosity was fully focused on the human commander. When Ethan was presented to the court, he bowed with practiced respect. His words were polite, measured, and honest. He spoke of peaceful intentions, shared knowledge, and mutual caution. He did not flatter. He did not boast. Lyra noticed something else. When his eyes moved across the court, they passed over her quickly, almost deliberately. Not rude, not dismissive, but careful, as if he had decided not to look for too long. No one avoided the Princess of Arvella. After the formal meeting ended, many diplomats lingered, eager to speak with her. The human did not. Ethan requested permission to return to his assigned quarters, citing the need to send reports to Earth. The request was granted, though several council members exchanged confused glances. Lyra felt a small spark of irritation. She was used to attention, but more than that, she was used to understanding people. This human did not fit any pattern she knew. Over the following days, Ethan fulfilled his duties with precision. He attended required meetings, toured approved facilities, and answered questions clearly. Yet whenever Lyra entered a room, he adjusted his position. He chose a different conversation. He excused himself when protocol allowed. He never ignored her. He never disrespected her. He simply kept distance. The palace staff noticed. Whispers spread quietly through the halls. Some said the human feared her. Others suggested he carried a secret insult. A few wondered if humans had strange customs regarding royalty. Lyra listened and said nothing. She preferred observation to rumor. One afternoon, she arranged a cultural exchange in the palace gardens. Music flowed through the air, soft and harmonic. Alien and human delegates shared food, stories, and laughter. Lyra moved among them with practiced ease. Ethan stood near the edge of the gathering, speaking with a science advisor. When Lyra approached, the advisor excused himself, leaving the two alone. For a brief moment, Ethan considered stepping away. Then he stopped himself. Avoidance had limits, and this was becoming noticeable. "Commander Hale," Lyra said, her voice calm and warm. "Are you finding our world acceptable?" "Yes, Princess," Ethan replied. "Your hospitality has been generous." "That sounds formal," she said lightly. "We do," Ethan said, "but we also respect boundaries." Lyra studied him. His tone was even, but his eyes carried weight. Not fear, not awe, responsibility. "Then may I ask directly?" she said. "Why do you keep your distance from me?" Why? The question was simple. The meaning behind it was not. Ethan paused. He chose his words carefully, aware that every sentence could shape the future of two civilizations. "I do not wish to cause misunderstanding," he said. "Misunderstanding grows faster in silence," Lyra replied. He met her gaze then, fully. "You are an important leader, and I am a representative of a younger species. Close personal familiarity could be misread." Lyra raised an eyebrow. "As what?" "As dependence," Ethan said. "Or influence." The answer surprised her. Most envoys sought influence. They wanted favor, access, advantage. This human avoided it. "You believe proximity is a risk," she said slowly. "Yes," Ethan replied. "Not to me, to everyone else." Lyra felt something shift inside her. No one had ever spoken to her like this. Not with fear, not with desire, but with careful restraint. Before she could respond, a council aide approached, calling her away. Lyra left, but her thoughts stayed with the human commander. That night, Ethan sat alone in his quarters, recording a private log. He spoke quietly, aware that these words were not meant for anyone else. "The Arvellans are powerful," he said, "more than expected. Advanced beyond us in energy control and fleet coordination. They are not hostile, but they are confident. Too confident. Princess Lyra is intelligent and perceptive. That makes her dangerous in a way she does not intend." He paused. "If humans are to survive among the stars, we cannot rely on charm or trust alone. We must rely on judgment." He ended the log and stared at the dim lights of the alien city outside his window. Across the palace, Lyra stood in her own chamber, looking at the same stars. She replayed the conversation in her mind. The human had not avoided her because she was unworthy. He had avoided her because she mattered. That realization unsettled her. The next day, the council discussed long-term cooperation, trade routes, shared research, defensive agreements. Some council members spoke eagerly, already imagining the expansion of Arvellan influence. Lyra listened, but her thoughts drifted. She watched Ethan from across the chamber. He spoke only when asked. When he did, his words were cautious, balanced, and often included warnings alongside opportunities. At one point, a counselor suggested limited military integration, citing the protection Arvellan fleets could offer humanity. Ethan responded calmly. "Protection can become expectation. Expectation can become control. Humans prefer equal partnership, even when it is slower." The room grew quiet. Lyra saw discomfort ripple through the council. The human had named a truth they rarely considered. Power, once offered, was rarely without cost. After the meeting, Lyra made a decision. She would not ask again why he avoided her. Instead, she would learn why humans thought the way they did. And Ethan, watching her leave the chamber without a glance in his direction, felt a strange sense of relief mixed with unease. Distance protected him, but it also delayed the conversation he knew was coming, because sooner or later, the princess would not accept silence. And when that moment came, the truth he carried would not merely surprise her, it would shake her understanding of power itself. The days after the council meeting passed with careful calm. But beneath the surface, both sides felt a growing tension. Ethan continued his duties as before, but he sensed a shift in the palace atmosphere. Conversation stopped when he entered a room. Advisors watched him more closely. The Arvellans were not suspicious in a hostile way, but they were unsettled. Humans were not behaving as expected. Princess Lyra spent much of her time in the historical archives. These were not simple records. The archives were living systems that replayed memories, decisions, and outcomes from thousands of years of Arvellan history. Lyra had studied them since childhood, but now she searched with a new purpose. She looked for moments when power had been offered with good intent and later turned into regret. There were many. Civilizations absorbed for their own protection. Allies who slowly lost independence. Species that became quiet, obedient, and eventually forgotten. None of it had been born from cruelty. It had come from certainty. The belief that Arvellan ways were better, more efficient, more advanced. Lyra felt uneasy. Ethan's words echoed in her mind. Protection becomes expectation. Expectation becomes control. She realized something uncomfortable. Humans were not afraid of Arvelin power. They were afraid of what that power might do without meaning to. Meanwhile, Ethan requested access to the outer research rings of the palace, where experimental energy systems were tested. His request raised eyebrows, but it was approved under supervision. Transparency was part of diplomacy, after all. As he walked through the vast chambers of humming light and controlled gravity fields, Ethan's concern deepened. The technology was elegant, efficient, and far beyond human capabilities, but it was also adaptable. Too adaptable. An Arvellan scientist explained proudly how the energy cores could be repurposed in times of crisis. Defense, planetary shields, emergency fleet power. And if misused? Ethan asked quietly. The scientist tilted his head, confused. Misuse would be illogical. Ethan nodded. But the answer troubled him. History had taught humans that logic alone did not prevent disaster. People did. Later that day, Lyra surprised the palace by requesting to join the inspection. Protocol did not require it. But no one questioned her decision. When she arrived, Ethan stiffened slightly, then relaxed. Avoiding her forever was impossible. They walked side by side through the glowing halls, speaking little at first. Finally, Lyra broke the silence. You see danger where we see possibility, she said. I see responsibility, Ethan replied. Possibility without restraint is how mistakes become tragedies. Lyra considered this. You believe we lack restraint. I believe no one notices their blind spots without someone else pointing them out, Ethan said. Humans learned that lesson painfully. They stopped near a transparent wall overlooking a massive energy chamber. Light pulsed like a contained star. This system could change the balance of the galaxy, Lyra said softly. Yes, Ethan replied. That is why it must be understood fully. Not just how it works, but how it could be abused. Lyra looked at him. You think we would abuse it? I think someone eventually would, Ethan said. Not because they are evil. Because they are certain. The word struck her deeply. That evening, Lyra invited Ethan to a private discussion room. No council. No guards. Just a quiet space with soft light and a wide view of the stars. This time, Ethan did not decline. I have reviewed our history, Lyra said once they were seated. You are correct. We often mistake confidence for wisdom. Ethan said nothing. He had learned that listening was sometimes the strongest move. You avoided me, she continued, because you feared becoming a symbol. A bridge that could be used to justify control. Yes, Ethan said. Symbols are powerful. Humans have suffered under them. Lyra folded her hands. Then tell me this. Do humans see us as a threat? Ethan answered honestly. Not now. But potential threats are taken seriously. Survival taught us that. Lyra felt no insult in his words. Only truth. She made a decision. I want you to show me how humans plan for failure. Ethan looked up, surprised. You want to study human strategy? Yes, Lyra said. Not your weapons. Your thinking. Over the next weeks, an unusual exchange began. Ethan shared human case studies. Missions that failed. Alliances that collapsed. Decisions that saved lives because someone questioned authority. Lyra shared Arvellan philosophy, their belief in harmony and efficiency. Slowly, both began to see the gaps in their own views. Ethan noticed that Lyra asked difficult questions, especially when answers challenged her culture. She did not defend tradition blindly. That earned his respect. At the same time, tension grew elsewhere in the Empire. A faction within the Arvellan military began to voice concern. They believed humans were slowing progress, planting doubt, weakening resolve. They argued that decisive power ensured peace. Ethan became aware of these discussions through subtle changes. Restricted access. Delayed responses. Increased monitoring of his movements. One night, as Ethan returned to his quarters, an anonymous message appeared on his console. It contained only data, energy output projections, fleet configurations, scenarios, weaponized scenarios. Ethan's blood ran cold. Someone was testing the limits of the energy systems, not for defense, but dominance. He requested an urgent meeting with Lyra. She arrived quickly, reading his expression before he spoke. "They are preparing for options they should not have," Ethan said, showing her the data. Lyra's face tightened. "This was not approved by the Council. Approval comes after readiness," Ethan said. "Humans learned that too." Lyra felt a sharp mix of anger and shame. Ethan had not been avoiding her because he was distant. He had been avoiding her because he was standing alone against a future no one else wanted to imagine. "We must act carefully," she said. "If we confront them openly, they will deny everything." Ethan nodded. "Then we gather truth first." For the first time, they were not representative and Princess. They were allies. They worked together quietly, tracing data paths, observing communications, noting patterns. Lyra used her authority to ask questions that seemed harmless. Ethan applied human skepticism, looking for what was missing rather than what was shown. What they found confirmed Ethan's fear. The faction believed the galaxy needed firm guidance, and Arvella was best suited to provide it. "They think they are saving everyone," Lyra said softly. "Yes," Ethan replied. "That is always the most dangerous belief." As the evidence grew, so did the risk. Someone noticed the inquiries. Security tightened. Ethan's access was reduced further. One evening, Lyra stood alone in her chamber, staring at the stars again. She understood now why Ethan's words had shaken her. Humans were not special because they were stronger or smarter. They were special because they expected themselves to fail and built safeguards anyway. She realized something else. If she did nothing, history would repeat itself. And this time, she would be responsible. Across the palace, Ethan prepared a final report to Earth, unsure if it would ever be sent. He knew that once truths like these surfaced, there would be no safe distance left. Avoidance had protected him before. Now, only action remained. And soon, Lyra would have to choose not just between tradition and change, but between comfort and conscience. The galaxy was watching, even if it did not yet know it. The palace felt different after the truth began to surface. Corridors that once felt open now carried an unspoken weight. Guards were more alert. Conversations were quieter. Even the light flowing through the crystal walls seemed colder. Princess Lyra moved carefully through this tension. Outwardly, she remained calm, composed, the perfect image of Arvellan leadership. Inwardly, her thoughts were restless. The data she and Ethan had uncovered could not be ignored, but revealing it the wrong way could fracture the empire. Ethan felt the same pressure. He had faced danger before, but this was different. There were no clear enemies, no battlefield. The threat came from belief, from certainty that power equaled order. Humans knew this kind of danger well. They had lived through it many times. Their meetings became shorter and more discreet. They no longer spoke openly in the same rooms twice. Instead, they communicated through shared observations, small gestures, and carefully chosen words. One evening, Lyra joined Ethan in a quiet observation chamber overlooking the planet. The sky was filled with slow-moving lights from orbiting platforms. "You were right," Lyra said softly. "They believe control is kindness." Ethan did not smile. "That belief has ended worlds." Lyra looked at him. "Then teach me how humans stop it." Ethan took a breath. "First, by admitting they cannot stop it alone." Lyra nodded. That was something her people struggled with. Arvellans prided themselves on unity and efficiency. Asking for help felt like weakness. But she was beginning to understand that humility was not weakness. It was defense. They devised a plan that relied not on confrontation, but exposure. Instead of accusing the faction directly, Lyra would call for a full transparency review of all advanced energy projects, citing the need for trust with new allies. The request was legal. It was reasonable. And it terrified the wrong people. Within hours, resistance appeared. Council members questioned the timing. Military advisors warned of vulnerability. Progress should not be slowed. They argued. Lyra listened patiently. Then she said something no one expected. If our strength cannot survive examination, she said, then it is not strength. Silence followed. Ethan watched from the side of the chamber. In that moment, he saw what made Lyra different. She was not challenging them with emotion or pride. She was challenging them with logic and conscience. The review began. As records opened, patterns emerged clearly. Energy systems modified without proper oversight. Simulations labeled as contingency that clearly described domination strategies. Fleets repositioned under the guise of training. The faction denied intent, claiming preparation was misunderstood. Ethan was asked to give his perspective. He stepped forward, fully aware that this was the moment avoidance ended. Humans have made these arguments before, he said calmly. We called them safety plans. We believed we were preventing chaos. Instead, we created it. He did not accuse. He shared history. Wars started to prevent wars. Control used to maintain peace. Every time, he continued, we believed we were different. Smarter. More justified. The chamber remained silent. Not because they agreed, but because they recognized the pattern. Lyra felt the shift. Doubt had entered where certainty once lived. But the faction was not finished. That night, emergency alerts echoed through the palace. A fleet maneuver had been initiated without council approval. Official explanation: a systems test. Unofficial reality: a show of readiness. Lyra understood the message. They were reminding her where power truly sat. She summoned Ethan immediately. They are forcing a choice, she said. Yes, Ethan replied. And hoping you choose stability over truth. Lyra looked out at the stars. For the first time in her life, leadership felt heavy in a way no lesson had prepared her for. What would humans do? She asked. Ethan answered honestly. Some would submit, some would fight. The ones who saved others chose accountability, even when it hurt. Lyra made her decision. She addressed the Empire directly, bypassing standard council channels. Her message was calm, clear, and impossible to ignore. We are strong, she said. But strength without restraint is not leadership. It is fear, wearing a crown. The message spread quickly. Citizens began asking questions. Scientists reviewed data. Junior officers hesitated. The faction responded by escalating. They attempted to isolate the palace communication network. They failed. Ethan had quietly shared human cybersecurity frameworks weeks earlier. Redundancy, decentralization, and expectation of failure had protected the system. Lyra realized then another human truth. Humans survived not because their systems were perfect, but because they assumed they would break. As the faction lost momentum, cracks formed within it. Some members stepped back, unwilling to cross the line into open rebellion. Still, one final move remained. A single energy platform began powering up beyond safe limits. A demonstration, meant to prove necessity. Ethan and Lyra stood together in the control chamber, watching the readings climb. If they fire, Lyra said, they will justify everything. Ethan nodded. And condemn themselves. Lyra took control authority. Her voice was steady. Stand down, she ordered. There was hesitation. Then refusal. Time narrowed. Ethan spoke quietly. There is another way, he explained quickly. Redirect the energy. Not into space, but into a harmless dispersal pattern. It would overload the system, rendering it unusable without causing damage. It will set us back years, Lyra said. Yes, Ethan replied. But it will save lives. She did not hesitate. Do it. The platform's light flared, then collapsed into a controlled cascade. Alarms rang, then faded. The threat ended. The cost was clear. Advancement delayed. Pride wounded. But the galaxy remained safe. In the aftermath, the faction dissolved under scrutiny. Some faced consequences, others stepped down quietly. The empire did not fracture. It learned. Lyra stood before the council days later. "We will rebuild," she said. "But we will rebuild with safeguards. With voices that question. With allies who challenge us." She looked at Ethan, including humans. Ethan felt a weight lift he had carried since arriving. Later, alone on a balcony, Lyra spoke softly. "You avoided me because you feared what closeness might allow." "Yes," Ethan said. She smiled faintly. "Now I understand. Distance was your way of protecting us all." "And yours," Ethan replied, "was listening." They stood together in silence, watching a galaxy that had come dangerously close to repeating an old story. This time, it had been changed, because one princess chose conscience over comfort, and one human refused to look away. The weeks after the crisis were quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet than before. It was not the silence of tension or fear. It was the silence of reflection. Across the Arvellan Empire, discussions unfolded in councils, research halls, and public forums. People spoke openly about power, restraint, and responsibility. For the first time in generations, certainty was questioned without shame. Princess Lyra walked through the palace without escort one morning, something rarely done before. She wanted to feel the mood of her people directly. Some bowed as she passed. Others simply watched her with thoughtful eyes. There was no anger in them, only curiosity and respect. Ethan prepared for departure. The human ship had completed its data exchange and repairs. Officially, his mission was complete. Unofficially, he knew his presence was no longer necessary. Humans had done what they did best. They had asked difficult questions, shared painful lessons, and stepped back before becoming permanent fixtures of power. Lyra knew he was leaving before he told her. They met one last time in the palace gardens where they had first spoken alone. The light was soft, and the air carried a calm energy, as if the world itself had relaxed. "So," Lyra said, "the human returns to his stars." "Yes," Ethan replied. "That was always the plan." She nodded slowly. "I once thought avoidance was distance. Now I understand it was care." Ethan looked at the alien trees, their leaves glowing faintly. "Humans have learned that sometimes the greatest harm comes from staying too close for too long." Lyra smiled gently. "And Arvellans are learning that strength does not fade when shared. It sharpens." They walked together in silence for a while. "Your people changed us," Lyra said finally. "We did not change you," Ethan replied. "You chose to listen." Lyra stopped and faced him. "That choice will shape our future. And the galaxy will notice." Indeed, it already had. Messages arrived from neighboring systems, curious inquiries, careful praise. Some were wary, but many were hopeful. The Arvellan Empire had shown restraint where dominance was expected. That alone altered galactic assumptions. Humans, once seen as fragile newcomers, were now viewed with something new: respect. Not because of their ships or weapons, but because of their mindset. Ethan's final report to Earth was brief but meaningful. He described an empire willing to learn, a leader willing to doubt herself, and a moment where restraint saved more than force ever could. On Earth, the report spread quietly through strategic and academic circles. It became required reading, not as a victory story, but as a reminder. Humans did not survive because they were flawless. They survived because they remembered their failures. As the human ship lifted off, Lyra stood on the landing platform and watched it rise. She felt no sadness, only gratitude. Some connections were not meant to last forever. Their value came from when they existed, not how long. Days later, Lyra addressed the Empire again. "We will move forward," she said, "not as guides above the galaxy, but as participants within it. Our power will remain strong, but our conscience will remain stronger." The council agreed. New laws were passed. Oversight became standard. Military authority was balanced by civilian review. Innovation continued, but with caution woven into its design. Progress slowed slightly. Disasters vanished almost completely. Years passed. Humans and Arvellans met often, but always as equals. Joint missions focused on exploration, disaster relief, and knowledge exchange. Humans were rarely the strongest in the room, but they were often the ones asking the questions no one else wanted to ask. Why are we doing this? What happens if we are wrong? Who pays the price if we succeed? Other species began adopting similar thinking. Safeguards spread. Councils changed. Empires softened at the edges, not becoming weak, but becoming aware. Lyra grew into her role as ruler with quiet confidence. She never forgot the human who once avoided her. In private moments, she reflected on the lesson he had brought without intending to teach. Power invites closeness. Wisdom chooses distance. Ethan continued his work among the stars. He met many leaders, many worlds. Some listened. Some did not. But the story of Arvella traveled with him. Shared in briefings and quiet conversations, there was one question he was often asked. Why did the princess listen to you? Ethan always answered the same way. Because she was already strong enough to doubt herself. In the end, that was what shook her most. Not his words, but what they revealed about her own people. And so, in a galaxy filled with ancient powers and rising empires, humanity earned a place not through conquest or fear, but through something far rarer. The courage to say, we might be wrong, and the wisdom to act as if that mattered. The stars did not belong to humans. They never had. But humanity proved they were worthy to walk among them. Not as rulers, not as saviors, but as reminders that survival is not about control. It is about choice.